I'd like to talk today about why I think web3 gaming is inevitable, but I think let's introduce myself first. So, as you guys know, I'm Kmao. I'm currently the general manager of Ethlizards, and we're a GameFi investment DAO. And hopefully, we're looking to focus on essentially the frontier and the future of web3 gaming. Let's actually start with talking about the history of web3 gaming and crypto in general. So, I came around the space around 2016, 2017, where the ICO sort of boom happened, ICO summer. During this time, web3 gaming wasn't really much of a narrative, but an important narrative during this time I think you should recognize is that it was blockchain, not Bitcoin, where blockchain technology was very focused upon. And through this, we saw a glimpse of how gaming could be affected by this. There were projects like Engine Coin, for example, which essentially was a very glorified way of hosting Minecraft servers at the very early stage. In 2017, obviously there weren't things like the metaverse or play-to-earn tokenomics, etc. So the way we approached gaming at that time period was just very surface level. We can put blockchain and games together and do something that's more player-friendly or user-friendly. Fast forward a couple of years, a bear market, unfortunately, and we arrive at the pinnacle of gaming, I guess, or the most heated discussions upon it. This is obviously Axie Infinity's era, where play-to-earn tokenomics became really popular, and we had that whole sort of wave of, if you play this game for 10 hours a day, you could make like $400 or something absurd, which was obviously wasn't going to last for a long time. But I think this was an interesting direction we explored, because instead of leaning on to other aspects of blockchain technology and crypto in general, right? And a lot of companies chose to pivot on this aspect of monetary incentives and just using crypto to give better user incentives outside. So I think through this we sort of went from very surface level technologies combining with gaming to essentially a completely different side of the spectrum, where we're focused too much on blockchain being used with crypto and not enough on the game itself. So if you look at Axie Infinity, for example, right, there was a huge bunch of narratives that surfaced around it, where it was essentially players getting forced to play games based on extrinsic motivations. So if you play games a lot yourself, I think a lot of the reasons why, or basically two biggest reasons why, would be you either want to get better at the game. I want to rank up to Challenger in League of Legends. Fortunately, I'm hard stuck silver, but let's talk about this later. Or number two, you just want to have fun with friends, right? And if you're not talking that much of the user psychology, but a lot of people view games as a form of escapism, because rewards pretty cruel. There's a lot of things to worry about, but in a cool ARAM game, it's just you and 5 other people brawling it out, which is a lot more peaceful. And when crypto sort of came into the play here, right? Crypto, money, real world. When people started implementing crypto and games together, sort of that disconnect really became very obscure, right? Where instead of people playing games out of the intrinsic motivations, it shifted to extrinsic motivations like money, etc. And we had 3 really big negatives through this. Number one was there were players of the game which were purely focused on the monetary incentives. Sort of like, I'm sure you guys have seen the memes about third world country people leaving their doctor's degrees or whatever degrees to play Axie Infinity and make 4 times the median wage of them, and the millions of guilds that raised money through it, which was just to literally farm South Asian third world countries for their cheap labor, which is obviously a horrible environment to be in. And some of the other factors were sort of when you put economics too much into a game, you intertwine a player's time with their monetary value. And if you're a regular gamer, spending 10 hours to grind an item which can be bought for $10 doesn't feel fun. Why would you not spend the money there? And that's why I think the last sort of 2 years with play to earn, we've leaned too much into that side. However, let's look on the positive a bit, right, guys? We're talking about why web3 gaming is inevitable. So I think to summarize why web3 gaming is inevitable, it comes down to 2 main reasons. And number one is a more subdued version of these tokenomics and these incentives, where we can offer user incentives, right? But they need to be subdued. They need to be managed well enough where tokenomics aren't overblown, where inflation isn't unmanageable, where rewards aren't permanently diminishing, and people don't view the game as like a farm. Like, if any of you guys have ever played DeFi Kingdoms, with the whole jewel debacle that went to it was like $20, man. I saw it like 10 cents for some reason. But yeah, that whole game it's a very good example of why Web3 gaming leaned too far into that narrative of farming, making money, whatever. And now I think we're in a very positive state of mind, actually. Despite, F being at pretty low prices, I think we're actually in a very good market condition where I think people have realized that crypto gaming can't be too focused on crypto, and we need to actually, the second part of the word, guys, gaming. We need to build fun games. We've seen the classic AAA game Illuvium do a lot of really cool innovative ideas. We've seen other companies like Big Time, Immutable X, all take and poach developers from Riot Games, Blizzard Entertainment, and they have actually good game devs. And before it was a bunch of blockchain devs that tried to make a game, and they didn't understand anything about player intentions, what makes a game fun, and they were just let's do some tokenomics and pondonomics, which didn't really work, obviously. But yeah, sorry, a bit off topic, but this goes to my second point of ownership, asset ownership, and interlopability, which is another important point why I think Web3 gaming is inevitable. So to summarize, tokenomics, subdued play incentives involving monetary incentives, as well as play ownership, which is why we think it is the future. But let's explore the second point a bit more, because I don't think it's been touched upon enough. I think the very surface level of play ownerships is sort of I buy a skin for $1,000, I can then resell it very easily for $1,000, which is very surface level, but it's still very beneficial, obviously. If you look at games like Counter-Strike and RuneScape are probably the most easiest example of tradable assets, right? If you actually look into a lot of the development required to make trading a huge necessity of the games, it's very complex. To build a tradable marketplace to trade these Web2 assets, right? And what a lot of people don't realize is that not only do assets being tradable implement and help the users because they actually own their stuff, right? It takes a lot of development strain off the actual developers. Steam Marketplace was an expensive and very tiresome item marketplace to build. And CS:GO skins they've been constantly needing updates and trade changes, whatever, etc. And it wasn't even a streamlined experience, right? To exchange these for actual monetary value, you'd have to go through 5 middlemen and one dodgy seller that only takes Bitcoin for some reason. It was not a fun experience. But when you look at sort of adding 721s and NFTs and these assets, right? What do we have? We have OpenSea, we have LooksRare, we have X2Y2, we have these frameworks and standards that have already been written for actually quite a couple of years now, and it's just very plug and play. And at the end of the day, crypto is very open source, and which is why this sort of asset interoperability hasn't been explored enough. Because, guys, not only do you get to own your assets, right? You save your developers a lot of time, and they can focus on putting money into making gameplay better and making balance change instead of figuring out how to milk the users for more money because it's hard to build a marketplace or something like that. But yeah, other than these surface level ideas, I think there's two other points you can take from these sort of asset ownership that come from it. Number one would be just all around better revenue models. With traditional games, where do we see the revenue come from? A sale of a game, a sale of assets, etc. Right? Marketplace fees aren't a thing. Rewarding your players with rewards for inviting or whatever users isn't really a thing. We see very glimpses of these, right? With for example, Fortnite creator codes, which you get a percentage of whatever user spends, right? But these are shady databases that aren't tracked and aren't very efficient as well. Actually, they are pretty efficient, but they're not tracked. They're not open. Back to centralization here. And there's just a whole lot of revenue models we can explore with Web3 gaming concepts that are made possible with NFTs here. And yeah, the third point is actually an interesting point. I don't think it's been touched upon enough, which is the decentralized ownership of games, where we see DAOs obviously make a huge rise to the top of trending topics these days in crypto. And one topic that hasn't been explored enough is how DAOs can actually own and control a game. If you as a gamer, right, want to make changes to a game, realistically there's no way to do so. But with DAOs and I'm not going to go too deep into this because there's certain governance and interfaces that need to be implemented. But at the very surface level is you get the opportunity to potentially own part of a game and push forward your own changes. Like, that champion's broken, I want him nerfed. Maybe in the future where DAOs exist a lot more intertwined in games, you can actually push for these changes to be made if the greater community and the community community, whatever, they agree with this sort of ideologies. But yeah, I guess to summarize this sort of short little ramble by me is why do we think web3 gaming is the future? Number one, play-to-earn economies will always be very prevalent in a society where capitalistic tendencies are even becoming more shown. It allows better incentives to be given, right? People get rewards for signing up to games, free gift boxes, whatever. With crypto, if managed well, if inflation's done well, if rewards are managed enough, we can give real monetary value to entice users to play games. But obviously, the game needs to be good. And second of all, I think asset ownership and interoperability of these assets will be extremely important in future years. And I really want to envision a future where there are open source marketplaces that trade assets from Illuvium assets to random the fourth indie dev release from whatever studio, and we see a world where every couple of weeks we see new incentives being pushed from games that both reward and entice users to play new interesting games as well as make these assets tradable. But yeah, I think that's all. I'd love to take any questions from anyone.
Yeah, I've got a question for you. I was just curious whether you've come across any projects in Web3 that you feel are moving in the right direction in creating a sustainable Web3 economy.
I think Kieran might kill me for this because I'm not going to talk about Illuvium, but I think the immutable sort of game studio is actually doing a lot of good steps. I think Guild of Guardians and the Gods Unleashed platforms are very talented, and because I think the way they're going through talent is in a very good way. The head of GOG, Derek Lau, writes a lot of articles about how he views gaming, and he puts up some very interesting points, which I agree with a lot of them, which is on sustainable economies, enticing users to Web3 games, and shifting to a Web3 sort of based economy. Also writes a really cool piece on play-to-play concepts, which is sort of trying to look at doing a poker approach to games, but it's very early stage, so let's not talk about that. But I do think GOG is pretty well because the way they approach gaming as a whole is pretty. It's like a good right. They're not focused on the economies and the incentives. They're focused on we're going to build a good game out, and then we can use crypto to enhance the areas where traditional Web 2 is lacking, which I think is the correct approach to when it comes to games because there's a lot of negative stigma around crypto, obviously, and if you're a gamer and you wanted to play games and people were mining F at that time, you probably had to pay like $2,000 for a GPU, which obviously didn't increase sentiment much better. So I do think GOG's idea of sort of almost abstraction away from crypto is the better approach, where you focus on hitting gamers first before you start introducing these technologies that can improve them. And it's sort of like, maybe in like 10 years time, right? People will literally be trading NFTs that they don't know are NFTs. Yeah. And we won't get memed across by like right-click savers. But yeah, any more questions?
I have one question. Trading platform for NFT is great, but the biggest problem is the massive adoption. So how you apply so the central market right now is Steam, right? You can usually just put in your credit card and buy stuff and buy a game. And how do you put the blockchain in the back end and actually hide everything and let it like a Web2 user feel they don't actually interact with crypto or blockchain, but actually they are playing a Web3 game.
Yeah, I think that's important, right? And there's sort of two approaches to look at it: the business side and the consumer side. When it comes to a lot of indie sort of games, I don't know if you are familiar with the process of getting your game onto Steam, but it's pretty exploitatory, right? They're basically a monopoly. You spend hours of time trying to do getting your game on, and you pay a huge amount of. I'm not exactly sure about the percentages, but I know you pay a huge share of your earnings to Steam. And it's a very hard process. With Web3, we obviously can, we have open source software, right? We can obviously move away from this structure and give indie devs a lot more actual flexibility. And even though I think indie developers are going to be probably the backbone of our industry in the future, because it just adds a lot more like spunk to things. On the consumer side of things, right, to abstract away from these technologies is not very hard. You just write like it's not very hard to create like Steam with the blockchain on the back end, just to like have things iterated through. If you look at immutables, marketplaces, and all those things, that's basically what they are. They're just traditional marketplaces with like additional blockchain functionality. So to build something on the back end and then, I guess, abstract it away from a user, it's all based on UI. And if you have good UI people, anything can work.
But yeah, do you know where to find indie devs that aren't seemingly allergic to Web3? Like, I've posted a couple of places looking for staff, and both places have got taken down straight away, saying, you can't post here, this is about Web3, or NFTs, no, we don't do that here.
I remember seeing a Twitter post, like, I think a couple of months ago, about like some Perth community that were like really against Web3, which is a problem, right? I don't know. I think when you try and hire indie devs, I think it's honestly pretty impossible at this stage because of the stigma. But I do think people in tech is a lot more, in tech in general, and bigger tech companies are very open to the concept of like Web3. I've seen a lot of people from Riot, Blizzard, like Activision and all these companies pivot to Web3 games. So I do think that route is possible. But yeah, I can't, it's pretty hard. Yeah, game devs are pretty against Web3, I think, which is a stigma we need to fix in the future. And I think with the shift away from forcing Ponzi-nomics in every project, we'll see that happen. And once we see a lot more AAA games launch that come out of Web3 studios, I think that sentiment will slowly start to improve and get better.
Thank you.
Hi. So Web3 gaming has pretty strong potential to be a large part of the onboarding process of Web2 users and general users into the blockchain space once we start to get the games more user-friendly. I was wondering if you'd seen any projects or heard of any strategies that are approaching the Web2 and Web3 onboarding in a streamlined way because of the fact that you have fiat and crypto users.
Yeah, I do think if we move, every sort of bull market has like narratives, right? And I think an important narrative in the future is just going to be mainstream adoption. And I do think crypto gaming ties in very well to that. As for smooth living onboarding processes, I think the best example would be sort of probably Big Time, where Big Time is they're very friendly with fiat payments and everything as well, and they don't sort of distance themselves from crypto users as well. I haven't seen a perfect example of it done because I think it's just quite hard to fully abstract away from crypto, especially if you're building on like a blockchain like Immutable, Polygon, whatever. Yeah, but I think Big Time would be a very good example of how they streamline their processes. Everything that you can do with crypto, you can do with fiat. Everything you can do with fiat, you can do with crypto, and you can just play the game without like needing to like hassle about any of this, assuming you have like alpha passes and stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for a wonderful talk. Kmao, where can the people find you and what you do?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. I don't tweet much though. I think it's Kmao37 or something. Yeah.
Good luck. All right. Thank you very much. Round of applause.